Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So, I'd like to say thank you for joining us for our August Landlord Meeting. And again, my name is Roel. I'll be your host for today's meeting. And we really appreciate you taking time to be here today. Our goal is to give you a clear update on what we're seeing across, leasing, maintenance, real estate market, and also the very important part, which is the Virginia landlord tenant law and also property management updates. So with that, I'd like to, go over with you our today's agenda. So of course, we will be introducing, the people behind Freedom Property Management, and also we will be having a quick overview of the leasing, maintenance, as well as the real estate market update, and also the VRLTA and also PMA updates. And also we will be providing you like Q&A part wherein you can ask questions, and we'll definitely have, answers for you. And before we start, I'd like to introduce Freedom Property Management Team. And let me start with yours truly. And again, my name is Roel. I'm your assistant property manager, assistant property manager here at Freedom Property Management. I'd like to say happy Friday, everyone. I'll pass over along with Tiffany. Hi, Tiffany.
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks, Roel, for hosting our routine landlord Zoom meeting. I am your principal broker and owner here at Freedom.
Thank you, Tiffany. And also the floor is yours, Ella.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ella, your Director of Operations. I oversee our day-to-day operations and help ensure our owners and properties are well taken care of. It's great to see you all, and thank you for joining our landlord meeting.
Thank you, Ella. And also Rans. Hi, Rans.
Hi everyone, my name is Rance. You probably don't know me. I just joined Freedom recently, like 3 months ago. I mainly work behind the scenes to improve how we operate and make better use of technology and help the team work more efficiently so we can better support you as our landlords. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Rans. And also our leasing coordinator, Pat. Hi, Pat.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. Pat Mendoza here, leasing assistant at Freedom Property Management. Happy Friday!
Thank you so much, Pat. And also Stacy. Hi, Stacy.
Hello, all. Stacy Bowman here. I am your real estate lead on the sales side of Freedom Property Management in sales. I help out with all of our landlords, tenants, as far as with buying, selling, with helping tenants look at properties and things like that. If you have any questions or need any insight as far as the real estate side, I'm your girl.
Thank you so much, team. Now, so I think as we can, start the agenda for today. So our first part is I'd like to call Tiffany to walk us through to, our latest leasing performance, including activity, renewals, move outs, vacancy, and also overall portfolio trends. Go,
Excellent.
Tiffany.
Thanks, Roel. Before we roll into this, I did want to bring to our landlord's attention. You might notice that there's a very familiar face that's missing from our team photo. Tracy Terry, our property manager for the last 8 years, is moving on from Freedom. It's a very hard thing to lose a team member that's been with you and ingrained with the business for so very long, but we wish her all the best. It's been a little crazy here the last month. So we apologize if you have felt any of the strain of that. Our goal is to have this transition not affect our service level. If you have any questions, any concerns, please bring those up to me or to Ella. But I did want to just make that announcement, and that we will be replacing her role in different ways. You'll see probably in our next landlord Zoom meeting, you'll see a new face. We will have a new field property inspector joining Freedom. And this is really exciting. This is a role that I have been wanting to figure out how to bring into the team for a while now, because for the last 16 years doing property management, it requires a lot of in the field at property work, but then it requires a lot of administrative work. And it's very hard to do both at the same time and to juggle that, especially in Northern Virginia with this traffic. So our new field operation or field property inspector, her main job is going to be in the field, taking care of move-ins, move-outs, site inspections, periodic inspections, smoke alarm certifications, meeting inspectors, meeting appraisers, doing the field work so that we can continue to improve and elevate our service level for our landlord clients and our tenants. So that was the quick update on the team. Moving into leasing performance. So here at Freedom, we have had a very busy summer. In June, we renewed 14 leases and moved out 9 tenants. And in July, we renewed 21 leases and moved out 9 tenants. Most of the move out reasons were pretty standard. Tenants were relocating. We did have quite a bit of property owners that are moving back into the area. We had a few of them it was time to sell the property. And then we did have some tenants that decided it was time to purchase their home. And some of those ended up being early terminations, and others were at the end of their lease cycle. And a total of 16 properties that we leased between the 2 months. So with that, I also wanted to add that the year to date, we've leased a total of 37 properties. And currently we have 10 properties that are active on the market for rent, with 2 more coming soon. Of those 10, the average days on market is about 28 days on market. And I bring that up because I also have some data on Northern Virginia as a whole. So Northern Virginia leasing as a whole, just for detached, so your single family home. So Northern Virginia, and this is going to be our geographic area. So up to the DC line, out to Western Loudoun, down through like Warrenton, and then down through Stafford and back up 95 is the areas that Freedom serves. So detached property, so your single family homes, there's currently 44 coming soon, and there's 630 active right now. So there's 630 detached homes that are our competition, with an average of 44 days on market for those homes that are currently active. Townhomes, there's 84 coming soon, and 1,143 that are active. Those active properties have an average of 36 days on market. So when we look at our 28 days on market for our active properties, we know that we're still well within, and we're under the average for Northern Virginia. But this is creeping up, and we've felt it all year that 2026 compared to 2025 is a completely different animal. We have a lot more inventory on the market. If I compared our total inventory in Northern Virginia in 26 to 25, there's going to be a lot more. And there's a couple reasons for that. You have fewer renters in the market. We didn't get all the jobs back that we lost in 2025. We also have a lot of homeowners that don't need to sell their house in order to buy their next house. So they're now coming into the landlord market. They're coming into property management, many of them. And so we have more rental inventory that's out there. So more inventory, less demand creates that gap there. So some softening in rent prices. If you've had a turnover recently, you've probably experienced that we're not able to be as aggressive in the rent prices. And we also need to budget for more time, more vacancy in between tenants, because there's so much more competition. So just kind of bringing that to light, in that while we have had a really good summer, a very busy summer, the single family homes are renting faster than the townhomes, and condos are taking much, much longer to rent. But we're expecting that to continue to be a little softer through the fall. We usually get softer in the fall and in the winter anyway. So plan that. If you do have a turnover coming up, we're going to be reaching out to you well ahead of time so that we can put those plans in place and have appropriate expectations so that no one is caught off guard with that. So that is our leasing performance overview. I'm going to hand it, I think, over to Roel for maintenance.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. That gives everyone like a good picture of, what we're currently seeing on the leasing side, how those trends are affecting our portfolio. So thank you so much. And now we're going to shift over to the maintenance side. And I'd like to give everyone a quick update on our maintenance performance for June and July. So overall, We see noticeable increase in maintenance activity from June to July, and even with the higher volume, our average completion time remains still fairly consistent and resident satisfaction continued to be very strong. So in July, we saw noticeable seasonal shift. Air conditioning became our number one maintenance issue, followed by appliances and also lighting. So that's fairly typical during the summer months when HVAC systems are working much harder, and also we tend to see more cooling related service requests. And since we're coming toward the end of the summer, I also want to give everyone a quick heads up about what's coming next. So we head into fall. You may begin seeing communication from our team regarding these seasonal maintenance items and any recommendations that may apply specifically to your property. So that means our focus will begin shifting from some of the summer related issues, particularly air conditioning, toward proactive seasonal maintenance, and that includes items such as fall HVAC maintenance, gutter cleaning, exterior checks, and other routine seasonal items that help prepare properties for the cooler months. Overall, our focus remains still the same. Response to maintenance concerns efficiently, provide quality service to residents, manage costs responsibly, and also protect your investment through proactive maintenance. Yep, so that's all we have on the maintenance side. Thank you so much. And now I think we can move now to the rental estate market update. I'll hand over the floor to Stacy so she can walk us through with the current market conditions, pricing trends, and also some of the factors that may affect rental property owners. Go ahead,
Oh,
Stacy.
yeah, thank you, Roel. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us. Today, I just want to give you a quick look at what's happening in Northern Virginia housing market based on the latest July 2026 information from both the Northern Virginia Association of Realtor and Bright MLS. The way I would describe this month's market is more choices, but that's not necessarily equal across every type of home. Just like Tiffany said, on the rental side, on the sales side, it's pretty much the same mirrored picture. The first big story is inventory growth. Right now, active listings have increased almost 20% compared to this time last July, bringing the total numbers of homes available for sale right now just at over 3,000, giving buyers more options and more flexibility than they had a year ago. But, and this is the important piece of it, the inventory increase isn't happening evenly. For instance, condo inventory right now is up more than 41%, and attached homes inventory is up 33%, while at the same time, detached home inventory is actually declined in comparison to last July by 2.5%. So when I say that inventory is up, what we really need to ask is what type of inventory are we talking about? For buyers looking for a condo or townhouse, there's substantially more choices and potentially more negotiating room. But for buyers looking for a detached home, the market is still much more competitive because supply remains limited. Two major factors in this trend is that the market is slowing slightly. It's not stalled. Whereas just as we're seeing on the rental side, on the sales side, the average days of on the market right now is 21 days, which is about 5% up from where it was last year. The big thing to keep in mind about that, the closed sales is actually down 2%, and new pending sales are down 7%. So there's more on the market and less closing than last year. So we're seeing buyers take a little bit more time and are a little bit more selective, but we're still seeing significant activity happening across the region. The third trend is pricing is beginning to show some moderation. The median sale price in July was about $750,000, which is about 1.3% down from last year. That doesn't mean that home values are falling across the board. In fact, the total dollar volume in sales has actually increased since last year. So what that tells us is buyers are becoming more selective. Sellers no longer can assume that they can simply put their house on the market and the result will be a quick sale at an aggressive price. Gone are the days of COVID as far as pricing wars and things going under contract well over list price and things like that. So what does this mean for our buyers and sellers? For buyers, it's probably the most opportunity we've seen in several years, particularly if you're looking for a condo or attached home, you have much more choices at this time to evaluate properties and potentially more negotiating leverage. For sellers, the message is very property specific. If you're selling a condo or attached home, you are competing against significantly more inventory. So pricing, condition, and presentation are critical. For detached home sellers, the limited inventory continues to provide more favorable environment for buyers. But buyers are still paying more attention to value. So if I were to summarize July in one sentence, I would say Northern Virginia is becoming more balanced, but the market is not one size fits all. Inventory is growing significantly for condos and attached homes, while detached home supply remains tight. And that distinction is going to be very important as we move into the second half of 2026. If anybody has any questions or are interested in buying or selling, please feel free to reach out. I'm here at your disposal. And thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Stacey, for the market insights. And now I'd like to hand over to Tiffany. So she can definitely discuss, the most important portions of today's meeting, changes involving the VRLTA along with updates to our property management agreement. Go ahead, Tiffany.
Excellent. And thank you all again for joining us. This is when we switch over from kind of an update on what Freedom's doing to like what big changes are happening statewide, that are happening behind the scenes, that are forcing us to make changes to our policies, our procedures, our leases, our management agreements. So Roel is going to drop in, or Ella is going to drop into the chat the VRLTA, the link to the VRLTA code, which is easily accessible online. You can Google VRLTA. That's the Virginia Residential Landlord and Tenant Act. This is the law in Virginia that supports and applies to all single family and all multifamily dwelling units. It defines the rights, the obligations, and responsibilities of landlords and tenants throughout the Commonwealth. If it's not directly related or regarded in the lease, then it always falls back to what the VRLTA say. And this could change twice a year, could change every July 1 and every January 1. So we just went through a legislative session where the new governor signed into law many landlord-tenant changes, and so many, in fact, that we had a huge chunk of them go into effect on July 1. There's another huge chunk going into effect on January 1, 2027, and we already know that July 1, 2027, we have even more coming. So this is great, so we can help to get processes and procedures in place ahead of time. And they've promised that there's not going to be any more coming next January or next July. So hopefully some legislative changes are going to die down so that we can get used to what the new normal is, and also give our political action committees an opportunity to kind of regroup and reassess and then communicate back with our legislators to propose modifications to some of these laws, because we all know that, the intentions behind a lot of these legal changes isn't necessarily what gets put into the bill. And so the result for our landlords and our tenants may not be what the intention was. So with some of the laws that are coming up, we're expecting some further changes and clarifications. But I'm going to go ahead and explain to you what has happened, kind of what we're doing now, and then what's coming up. Again, if you have any questions throughout, you're free to raise your hand. You can drop it into the chat, or if you want to wait until the end, we will do live question and answer. If your question is specific to your property, to a very specific scenario, then you can message the team directly. You can message Ella directly, or Pat if it's regarding leasing, or Roel if it's regarding maintenance. And then we can put that in the queue for us to follow up with you a little bit later. So we will move on to our next slide there. So really what I believe are, the key aspects of the VRLTA. There are 6 different areas. So you've got your responsibilities as a landlord. So most of you that are on, and myself included, we're landlords. And so the VRLTA is explaining what our responsibility, what our obligations are. It also details the tenant's responsibilities and obligations. It details how to apply rents, fees, and security deposits, and what the definitions of those are, as well as access to the dwelling unit. Dwelling unit is a fancy way to say your property, your rental property. So how access is granted, whether it be access for the tenant, access for the landlord, and then access for landlord representatives such as property management or contractors. It also goes through how delinquency and eviction procedures are handled and the requirements for the statement of tenant rights and responsibilities. This is a disclaimer that came into the scene back in COVID times in 2020 or 2021. And it was required, it came to the scene because there was a lot of funny business happening behind the scenes. There were a lot of fees and tenant responsibilities and landlords trying to get tenants to waive their rights on certain things. And so the Department of Housing and Community Development put together and made it law that the statement of tenant rights and responsibilities must be a part of every single lease in order for the lease to be complete and for it to be enforceable. That statement of tenant rights and responsibilities is translated into several different languages. It's available on the DHCD website, and it's also something obviously that we include with all of our leases. And that gets updated, if not every year, every other year. And it's really a summary, like it says, kind of a statement. It's a summary of what is in the lease and what's in the VRLTA. So the intention there is transparency and clarity. All right, we can move on to our next one. So in 2025, we really started to see some major compliance shifts in Virginia. And I go back to 25 because many landlords and even property managers and realtors that are just doing rental listings every once in a while, they don't know the laws that changed over the last few years. So kind of going backwards a little bit to bring you up to speed. So in 2025, the first page fee disclosure requirement really was put into place. And what this means, remember what I said back in like the 2020, 2021, there was a lot of funny business happening. And so tenant advocacy groups are like, well, you can't try to get one over on our tenants. We're going to fight you back on that. And Virginia Realtors agreed and like, okay, let's make this as clear and transparent as possible. So this means that all fees, all rent, all reoccurring routine fees or costs that the tenant would have to pay as a part of their lease have to start on the first page of the lease. They can't be buried on page 40. They have to start on the first page of the lease. So this includes your rent, includes pet fees, it includes security deposit, it includes maybe there's an elevator reservation fee for them to move in. If there's parking fees, if there's a required utility fee, if there's a resident benefit package that's on a monthly basis, all of these have to start. They don't have to finish, but they all have to start on the first page of the lease. Additionally, number 2, there's been increased restrictions on fees to tenants, one of which being restriction on charging processing fees to tenants. Every landlord, every property manager has to give their tenants at least one way to pay their rent that doesn't cost them an extra fee. So if you're DIYing, you'll want to make sure that if you have a transaction fee, maybe for your tenant to pay you through Venmo, then there wouldn't be a fee if they mailed you a check. So you have to give them multiple options. If you only have one option for them to pay you their rent, there cannot be a fee associated with it. The third is the 60-day non-renewal notice, and that currently is for larger landlords. So what we mean by larger landlords, here in Virginia, there's some exceptions to VRLTA depending on the number of rental properties, residential rentals that you own, or the percentage of residential rentals that you own in Virginia. So if you have more than 10% interest in more than 4 residential rentals, or you own more than 4 residential rentals in Virginia, you're considered a large landlord. So that means that currently you're required to give a 60-day non-renewal notice to your tenant. That includes if you're going to be increasing rent. So these are all things that we've already incorporated into our processes so that you're compliant. But again, if you're DIYing this, you'll want to know where your classification is. Are you a small landlord? Are you a large landlord? And which rules apply to you? Additionally, number 4, 2025 brought about an eviction diversion expansion. This eviction diversion program is through the courts, and as it states, it's a way to help keep tenants from being evicted. And this started as a pilot program in Hampton Roads and in Richmond, where the circuit courts had to encourage and require the landlords to do like payment plans with the tenants through this eviction diversion program. Well, I guess it worked so well that they have expanded it throughout the Commonwealth. It's not a requirement for all of the districts, but the districts can now include it. And Prince William County, none of ours up here in Northern Virginia have added that to their process, but we are keeping an eye on that because when and if that happens, we are going to need to change our delinquency and eviction process where we will have to start offering payment plans at certain steps of the way. There's also number 5, expanded tenant protections. As I mentioned, tenant advocacy groups are coming out in droves. So if you have access to any landlord advocacy groups, let's get on those. Let's make sure that we are making our voices heard as the small landlords, and we're not being lumped in with your multifamily. We're not being lumped in with those that have thousands of rental properties under their belt because that's not like kind. So the expanded tenant protections, we're going to see that come up here in 2026 as well. So we'll go ahead and move forward to the big headline that came about for July 1, 2026 is the update to the non-payment notice. So prior to July 1 of 2026, a landlord would need to issue what's called a 5-day non-compliance notice. This used to be called a pay or quit notice back in the day. But then we decided we don't want the tenants just quitting the property. We want them to pay and be responsible. So the 5-day pay or quit turned into a 5-day non-compliance. During COVID, that expanded out, but then it went back to a 5-day. Well, now it is officially expanded to a 14-day non-payment notice. And what this is requiring is that once rent is late, instead of sending that 5-day notice, we have to send a 14-day notice. So the underlying eviction process, that hasn't changed. It's just the waiting period to be able to enforce it has changed. It also has not changed when late fees apply. Late fees still apply after the 5-day grace period per the lease. So this notice is also required in order for us to start that delinquency process and file for eviction at the courthouse. If your tenant fails to pay their balance within those 14 days, then you or us are then permitted to go to the General District Court to file for that unlawful detainer hearing. What we're seeing already with landlords and property managers that have not incorporated this into their processes is they get to that first return date. And what that means is, let's say they were still using their 5-day notice. And so they give their 5-day notice on the 6th of the month. Then on the 12th of the month, after those 5 days are expired, they then go to the courthouse and they file what's called for an unlawful detainer hearing. And it's just paperwork that you file at the court with the clerk's office. You give them a filing fee, you give them your paperwork, They sign it, they stamp it, they say, okay, come back on this date at this time for the hearing dates. And it's normally either a Friday or a Monday. And it's like 2 or 3 weeks later. So that's the 12th-ish of the month. You then go 2 more weeks later. These are calendar days. 2 more weeks later. So you're now at the end of the month, right? So you're at the end of that first 30 days where they're late. And you go and you've got your whole file together, and the judge calls you up, and the tenant's on one side and you're on the other side. And the judge is looking at the file, and the judge says, landlord, I'm throwing this out. Your notice is incomplete. And that's all they tell you. So now you've lost a month. The judge is also not going to tell you why the notice is incomplete. They're going to say, if you need legal advice, go find an attorney. There's probably a lot out in the hallway. So this 5 day to 14 days is already impacting DIY landlords and property managers that are not staying current on these laws. So how is Freedom handling this? So we immediately, in July, we immediately changed our internal process for when we send that 14-day notice. So previously, and it was just kind of common practice, where the same date that late fees applied was also the date that we sent that 5-day notice. Well, we don't want to have to wait more days. And so if we have to wait in addition a 14-day notice, then we want that notice to start as soon as it can. And quite honestly, the notice and the VRLTA says that as soon as rent is late, the notice can be sent. And so rent is due per the lease on or before the first of the month. And so we have changed our policy and our process where the business day after the first, we send your 14-day notice to your tenant. And we provided your tenants back through June. We sent notices, we sent emails, we sent video, we sent text messages, giving them a heads up so that they were not surprised when July came around. And if they hadn't paid rent by the morning of the 2nd and they got their 14-day notice, they weren't surprised. We had one nasty gram from a tenant out of our 175 properties. So I'd say that's a pretty big success. We've always had a really low delinquency rate, and it's been even better. And our collection rate has been faster, meaning tenants are paying earlier because they don't want to get that 14-day notice, which means that we're increasing the probability that when we send you your money on the 9th or the 10th, that we have fully collected that, and there's very little chance of that check kicking back and bouncing back to the tenant. So just a bit of kind of behind the scenes of why we made those changes, what we're doing to help protect your rent money, and continuing with the service and the communication for your tenants. And next here, so is the increase on maintenance and habitability. Again, our tenant advocacy groups are really having a field day with us. And you may have noticed last month we sent out an update to our air conditioning policy where we've been battling this for years with aging systems, aging air conditioning systems. In the middle of summer, all of the HVAC contractors are booked and backed up. And so we get a tenant that calls us at 6 o'clock on a Friday saying my air conditioner is broken and it's supposed to be above 90 degrees for the next 5 days. The landlord's responsibility to mitigate that and to take care of that habitability issue doesn't go away just because it's after hours. It doesn't go away just because the contractors are booked. And so we went ahead and invested in several window and portable air conditioning units so that we can try to get ahead of that. And instead of saying, tenant, go get your own, it's all right, we will have a member of our maintenance team or a member of our team to the property within 12 or 24 hours, depending on the temperature, to get at least 2 window units taken there to the property to reduce the hazardous condition, to give us some time to make sure that the repair that needs to get done gets done the right way, and to also give us some time to maybe get multiple estimates. So we've gone through this. We've had a couple of situations where we've needed to dispatch it. And I tell you what, the tenant response that we're getting when we get window units, when we get temporary portable air conditioning to the property has been very, very positive, has been very thankful. We just had one where, because of a home warranty situation, it took almost 3 weeks for us to get this condo's air conditioning taken care of. And because it was a very unique condo, air conditioners with condo units, those of you that have condos, replacing your AC or repairing your AC is not as easy as a standard unit that might be at a single family or a townhome. And so for those almost 3 weeks, we had, portable temporary units there for the tenant during the middle of summer. So that was not an easy kind of policy procedure to put in place, but this is the reason for it, is because the VRLTA is really cracking down on maintenance and habitability. And so we have to be proactive with maintaining those habitability standards. We have to be proactive and really quick with responding to normal repairs as well as just routine maintenance. And we have to use high quality vetted contractors that we know are going to do the work the right way, that they're going to invoice us appropriately, and treat the tenants well while they're at the property. So, we're continuing to improve and find ways that we can make the whole maintenance and repair process even better for both our landlords and for your tenants. Because kind of going back to what we were talking about with leasing and days on market, I don't want maintenance to be the reason why your tenants leave the property and you end up having vacancy that we didn't need to have to begin with. So we really try to look at the big picture with, if we can make some small adjustments, if we need to spend a little bit of extra money or a little bit of extra time now, it's going to save you big money down the road. All right. I've got a question, and this is a great one. We had several conversations with property owners when we sent out that policy. If we already have 2 units, can Freedom install them if needed, and are stored at the property? So our answer pretty much to that has been no. We need to be able to make sure that what's being put in the property is working, that we have control over it, that we're the ones installing it, and that we're then inventorying it after the fact. We want to make sure and hold your tenants responsible for using it the right way. Additionally, we have had some properties that have come into our portfolio already occupied over the last year, and they've had personal property, they've had equipment, they've had things at the property that was there to begin with. And we go in and the tenants say, look, this is taking up space. I need my storage. I don't want all of the landlord's yard and lawn equipment in the garage. We actually removed a window AC unit from a property because the tenant said, I want this out of my closet. I need the closet space. So we can't require that the tenants store equipment at the property. And then we can't guarantee that even if we did, that it would work when we get there. So for that reason, we really want to make sure that we can control this process to provide as positive of an experience for your tenant and for you. So hopefully that helps explain that, Lisa. All right, we can move on to our next area real well. And apologies if I'm talking really fast. I tend to talk really fast anyway, but I'm, again, happy to answer questions along the way. So ask me to breathe and to hold if we need. So another really, really big change to the VRLTA in July, which has it's continuing to impact realtors that do just a couple of rental listings a year because they're not paying attention, is this maintenance fee restriction. And this is restricting landlords from charging maintenance fees in advance. So it doesn't mean that tenants can't be held responsible or won't be held responsible. It refers to how you're implementing that. And so this specifically is saying that you can't charge a repair deductible with your lease. You can't say, tenant, for every single maintenance request that you submit or every repair that's needed, you're going to pay the first $100. And that's a thing. And it's actually in our MLS because our MLS handles different states. And so some states allow it, Virginia now does not. And so a lot of landlords have been doing this in the past. It's no longer enforceable come July 1. This also includes, like, if you have a home warranty. And if you say, all right, tenant, you call in the home warranty claim and you pay the deductible, that's not enforceable now either. So that's another reason why Freedom has always maintained control of that. If we have a home warranty claim, if you have a home warranty on your property, we have a very love-hate relationship with home warranty companies. I can talk to you about that directly later. But we're the ones that are calling that in. We're the ones that are trying to control that situation. We're paying the deductible up front. We're trying to find out what the issues and the resolution was. So again, this doesn't mean that tenants no longer have maintenance or standard care obligations in the lease. What this does mean is now, even more than ever, we need to be proactive and we need to have full documentation. So the way that this process works for us, has always worked for us and will work for many other people now, is your tenant reports an issue. They report the garbage disposal is not working right. You send a contractor out to evaluate the garbage disposal. The contractor says, okay, well, the garbage disposal is full of last night's tacos. And that's why it stopped working. It burned out. Well, the contractor is going to need to take documented notes, take photos to prove that the reason why that garbage disposal is no longer working and burned itself out is because the tenant used it the wrong way. The tenant was negligent in the use of a system. And then the contractor provides that back to the landlord. The landlord pays the contractor, and then the landlord charges the tenant. So the tenant would then be responsible for reimbursing the landlord for that negligence that they caused that needed a repair or a replacement. Now, you still need to place reasonableness behind that. If that garbage disposal was already 10 years old and was rusting out and would have needed to be replaced soon anyway, would it really be reasonable to charge the tenant for that? Or do you, landlord, need to just pony up the money, take care of replacing that, keep your tenant happy, and now you know you have a brand new garbage disposal? And maybe you give your tenant some education along the way. So this maintenance fee restriction is not a big change for us here at Freedom because this is always how we've operated, but it is a big change for Virginia rentals. And we can go to, okay, yes. So the SCRA, which is the Service Members Civil Relief Act, is a law that is federal, and then the Virginia has their version. And basically, the Virginia code conflicted with federal code. And so now the VRLTA matches the federal code. And because our investment properties are here in Northern Virginia, this is even more important for us to be aware of because we have a lot of active duty military. We have a lot of military members that are going to be transitioning out into retirement because of the different installations that are around us. So this isn't expanding the categories of military members, and it also does not eliminate the requirement for them to give us written notice or for them to provide us with their military orders. What it is doing is it's removing an administrative restriction that under the old law, the tenant could not set their termination date for more than 60 days before their departure. So now, if they receive orders well in advance, they can go ahead and notify the landlord early and they can terminate early. Now, none of us want, unnecessary vacancy. And none of us want to have a vacancy very quickly after we just rented the property. But this is a law that has always been in effect, and now we just have a little more opportunity to be ahead of it. I remember several years ago, we had a tenant that was going to be retiring out of the military, and they were trying to give us like a 4 or 6 month notice, but we couldn't take it because Virginia code. And so now we could. And if they wanted to leave earlier, well, then they have full rights to say, I want to vacate earlier, and here's my my notice. Now, they are still required to provide us with at least a 30-day notice. They are still required to give us a copy of their military orders. So like they still have to qualify under that, but having some advance notice is a benefit for us and for you because it gives us a little bit more marketing time. And we can play in that turnover a little bit better than just waiting those 30 days. All right, so that's everything that just happened, July 1. January 1, 2027, there's a very big law change that's coming into effect that I don't believe the legislators and the tenant advocacy groups really thought this through before this was put into law. But the current laws state that, so it's called a tenant assertion. So if a tenant, that is if the tenant wants to basically sue the landlord during the term of their lease for non-performance. Could be that you're not maintaining the property. It could be that you're in violation of your lease somehow. So currently, the tenant would have to pay their rent into the court within 5 days of that court date. Starting January 1, the tenant does not have to pay their rent into court and does not have to bring their like in arrear. So let's say that a tenant is trying to avoid their 14-day notice and trying to avoid an eviction. Currently, if they wanted to do that, they still had, and they're making something up. They're saying, Tiffany, I haven't had air conditioning in more than 14 days. Virginia law requires you to fix this within 14 days. So I'm filing a tenant assertion and I'm suing you for non-performance. They would have to pay that rent for August into the courts in order for us to proceed. Come January 1, that's not going to be the case. Come January 1, the tenant does not have to deposit their past due rent or their current rent in order to file their assertion and technically sue the landlord. So that is, thankfully, we don't have again, a large delinquency issue. Most of the properties that we manage for you are considered like A and B quality class properties. You know, they're higher rent, they have better quality tenants. We don't have as much delinquency. So I'm hopeful that this isn't going to be a big issue for us, but for those of you that have rental properties in other areas of the state where you might have a higher delinquency percentage, you might have more C-class properties. Just stay aware of this because a lot of the tenant advocacy groups are educating tenants on how to, again, advocate for themselves. And a lot of times that's to the detriment of us small landlords. And so we want to make sure as we do, and if you're DIYing this, make sure that you're documenting every repair, every touch point, document every phone call, text message, every email with the tenant, with the contractors, with the HOA, with the insurance, whomever it is. And keep in mind that just because you have a home warranty, or just because it's maybe an HOA or a condo associated repair that's needed, if it's affecting the habitability of your property, it is still your responsibility as a landlord to comply with that and to act promptly. You can't hand the responsibility off to a third party. All right, let's move on to what's coming next July. So for our large landlords, a big thing that's coming for you is come July 1, 2027, we will have to give a 90-day rent increase notice to your tenants. And we are already here at Freedom changing some of our processes and policies across the board so that we can both serve our large landlords as well as our smaller landlords. So basically, we're going to be implementing this across our entire portfolio. This means that we're going to be reaching out to you about 4 months in advance in order to see what your plans are and to get a commitment as to, are you re-renting? Are you moving back in? Are you selling? And if we're re-renting, what are the terms of that rental? And if you decide to re-rent and the tenant doesn't agree, then what is the turnover time frame and approximate dollar amount? Some of you that have had turnovers this year have seen that update to our process where we're giving you a heads up of, hey, we expect the turnover for your property to be about $5,000 because we're going to need to do this and we're going to need to do this. Or we've had tenants in your property for a very long time and we're going to need to do all new paint and all new carpet and all new things. So, basically start budgeting now. Start budgeting 60 days in advance to be able to have those turnover funds. So we've got a question. So when is the tenant response required under the 90-day notice? So the tenant response is still per the lease. Tenants per the lease are required to give, I believe, a 60-day notice of vacating. So that's really the reason here is if the landlord is giving a 90-day notice of a rent increase, then the tenant has 30 days to consider whether they're going to stay or whether they're going to give their notice. The current regulation, the current standard leases, have it being 60 days across the board. So basically the tenants have no opportunity to consider that lease renewal before they have to give their notice. So Freedom, a few years back, we changed some of our timeline in order to give tenants about a 15-day opportunity to evaluate, but that's assuming that our process and the timing works perfectly. It's assuming that everyone can respond quickly. It's assuming that no one's on vacation or having emergencies. So, but now Virginia law is going to force it. So this is going to be a 90-day rent increase notice to tenants, and then the tenants would have to give their 60-day notice if they're going to accept or vacate. Additional change that is coming July 1 of 2027 includes expanded accounting requirements for that 14-day non-compliance delinquency notice. So what that means is, so currently you're supposed to, when you go to the clerk's office and you file for the unlawful detainer, you're supposed to provide a tenant ledger of what is due. Well, not only do you need to show what's due, but you have to show every part of that tenant's ledger from the time that their lease started. So that's what these expanded accounting requirements are going to be come next year. So if you're DIYing and you're not currently tracking every single charge to the tenant and every receivable from the tenant, you need to start doing that now, and you need to backdate it as much as you can. It needs to have the dates and the timestamps, preferably also have it shared with your tenant so that you have everything fully transparent. We're able to do this quite easily with the software that we use. So this isn't going to be a big deal for us. This just means that when we take, if we do have to file an unlawful detainer, we are including the entire tenant's ledger from the time that they started their lease. All right. And our final, so switching gears a little bit, and one of the big reasons why I wanted to go through the updates to the VRLTA and the Virginia laws is that has really fueled over the years us needing to make very routine changes to our property management agreement. And, over the last 21 years now that Freedom has been in existence, we've had different versions of our property management agreement in front of and contracted with our landlord clients. And some of you have been with us for a very long time, and you've had tenants with you for a very long time. And so we've never had to change that property management agreement, which means that our team is operating on about 4 or 5 different versions of our property management agreement within our portfolio. As you can expect, that makes it very difficult for us to stay efficient. It's a lot of touch points before we can take any action or do any responses. So with the rollout that we announced at the beginning of August, we are putting all of our properties onto our current property management agreement. And some of you that have been with Freedom for a very long time are going to be required to sign a new management agreement because the one that you have doesn't allow us to make changes by just sending a notice. Our current management agreement is current with all landlord-tenant laws, and it also gives Freedom the opportunity to change or to make standard policy changes within our management agreement with giving you appropriate notice. And so that helps us to stay current. It helps us to be able to be efficient across our portfolio and stay on top of industry best practices. and have clear responsibilities and expectations across the board. We have, if you've received our emails and you've looked at the frequently asked questions, thank you, Renz, for putting that together. The FAQ page is incredibly helpful to explain why and what and some of the details within the management agreement. We've taken it one step forward, and we're doing an entire video series where you can watch, and it's me talking, so I apologize. But I've got about 9 videos that we've taken our management agreement and split this out to, so that you can not only, I didn't want you to just listen to me reading this legal document, but the actual application of it, how Freedom processes it and what it means in real time. Because, you know, a legal document is nothing without kind of the understanding of what it is. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to tell you the legal process of it. You can definitely have your lawyer take a look at it. But I'm hopeful that that'll help answer any other questions. If you do want to set up a time to talk with myself, to talk with Ella about the differences between your current management agreement and what you're held under and the new, we're happy to do that. You'll start to see here over the next 2 weeks the updated management agreements coming out for your signature if you're required to sign. So we will tell you if you're required to sign it. If you're not required to sign it, then it's just the notice. And I think that is oh, we just lost one of our owners. You're welcome, Mr. Steinko. But I think that is the end of kind of our updates here. We do have the rest of the videos should be out by middle of next week. And so once those are live in our YouTube channel, you'll get an updated notice there. Thank you. It looks like a couple of our landlord clients will have already looked through and listened. So yes, you'll definitely have those available for you to listen before the management agreement is required to be signed. So we don't want you to feel forced to do that. We want to make sure that you have as much information as possible and an opportunity to ask the questions that you have. So I think we are moving on to our live Q&A section. So if you do have any questions for our team about anything that we talked about, any changes of the landlord tenant laws, any changes of the management agreement, overall, you're welcome to either drop them in the chat, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask those. Or if I answered all of your questions already, that's even better. All right. Excellent. Well, we really appreciate you being here with us today. As always, if you have questions for our team, feel free to reach out. Lisa, I see you just unmuted yourself. Nope. False alarm. Okay. Well, Lisa, you know how to reach us if you need. Thank you all for being here. I hope that the rest of your Friday goes. Oh, I can't hear you. Sorry, Lisa. Did you have a question, Lisa? I want to make sure you have the opportunity to ask your question. Yes. All right, we'll give Lisa a minute to drop her question. Oh, all right, she'll give us a call. Excellent. So again, I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your Friday. We have school starting on Monday for Prince William County. So for those of you that are sending littles or bigs, I've got my little starting first grade on Monday. Stacy just sent her youngest off to VCU. And so we've got lots of those wonderful, fun milestones that are happening within our community. So congratulations to all of the parents who made it through summer. It's been a ride. But again, thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, reach out to the team, and we'll see you at the next one.